If you're someone that's been dealing with a lot of hip issues in the past, we're gonna be going through a couple of hip prehab exercises that you can include in your programming. I actually hate the word prehab, but we gotta use it because it's a common search term that people will use. But typically what I consider prehab is exercises that you use to maintain your mobility and stuff that we check off in the clinic here at Moment Physical Therapy. So we'll look at mobility at the hip, internal, external rotation, and we'll also start to address the hip from 4 different perspectives, right? Hip flexors, glute med, adductors, and also the glute max. So let's start breaking those movements down now. This exercise that we're gonna be doing is the 90-90 hip external rotation. So I got Long Island Superman over here. So Lucas, first thing we're gonna do is you're gonna stay fairly tall and you're just gonna open up that left hip towards the ceiling. And that's pretty tough. One thing that you can do is you can get onto your forearm. So you're gonna lay on your forearm and that'll be a little bit less back involvement. And what we're looking for is, as you're doing this exercise, you need to be feeling your glute, right? If you start to feel the lower back and other things start to contribute, you're not getting what you want out of the exercise. Lucas, one thing we do now is also add the band. So we're gonna put the band around both legs and you're gonna wrap that around this knee. So in this same exact setup, lay down on your forearm and you're gonna still open up the leg as much as you can while keeping this ankle flat on the ground. And then you're gonna come back. A little bit of resistance is great because one, you want to be able to open up mobility, but you also want to be able to control that. So this is the first exercise that we're going to do to start to prehab the hip. Next thing that we're going to look at is going to be hip internal rotation. And you can get into the same position, a 90-90 hip internal rotation here. So we got Lucas set up in the same position. You can be more upright, so you can be on your palms, Lucas. But most of the time, people are very limited in internal rotation, so you can start to see the crunch on the side of the back. So we're going to have Lucas get into his forearm. And in this position, he's a little bit more neutral and he's just gonna lift his ankle off the ground while pushing his knee into the floor. And if you're doing this and you start to feel the front of the hip starts to come in instead of the deep glutes, all we're gonna do is we're gonna slide the knee back and you're gonna rotate your torso a little bit forward, keeping it in a straight line. And you're gonna go for the lift offs. And we're just gonna go for 15 repetitions here. What you're looking to feel is a deep glute contraction. You shouldn't feel anything in the front of your hip and you shouldn't feel anything in the back. The sensation that you typically feel in the front of the hip, people will say is like, I feel like I just gotta hit my hip, right? We don't want that. We want the deep glutes to be working. And this is a very, very tough exercise. So if this is even tough, you can start to lean forward even more to reduce the back contribution. And we're just going for 15 nice clean reps here. When we start to work on strengthening hip and prehabbing it, there's gonna be 4 different planes of motion that we wanna address. One of them is gonna be the lateral, so the outer hip. With the outer hip, we can do a Band-Aid curtsy step down. And here we have Lucas with the band around his waist. He's gonna stand on the right leg and he's gonna slowly reach his left leg past his stance leg. And what he's gonna feel is a stretch on the outside part of the glute. If this is really, really tough, you could take away the band. But what I really love about the band is that the band pulls him into that right glute and he's gotta push out of it. So you're gonna get an even deeper stretch with the band. What I'll typically look for is about 8 to 10 reps. And as that gets easy with body weight, you can simply add a kettlebell or a dumbbell and goblet rack and a little bit goes a long way. Lucas, get a ton of glutes here. At the top position, the one thing I wanna see is this hip, the stance hip that he's on, actually drops and his left hip gets a little bit higher. You're gonna get a full glute contraction there. One of the biggest muscle groups in your body is gonna be your adductor magnus muscle, and it's gonna make the inner part of your leg. This is super, super important because the groin not only stabilizes the medial aspect of your leg, but it's also a secondary stabilizer of your pelvis. One of the best ways to train your groin is gonna be the Copenhagen plank. So we've got Lucas set up here with the split roller. He's gonna put his leg up on a split roller. Our goal over time is gonna be able to work towards the ankle, but we're gonna start with mid shin. And in this angle, you're just gonna come off the ground as high as you can. And while you're here, we don't want it to be neutral. We actually want his hip to be hiked up all the way towards the ceiling. That way you're actually in full range adduction. We can start off with 30-second holds, but we'll work up to 45 seconds. If this is really tough, you can always start at the knee. If the knee is tough, you can start at the mid-thigh. But over time, we're gonna be working towards the ankle and stabilizing here. As that gets easier, you can also start to add the dip and then come back up. So you're starting to train it in a more lengthened position and doing things more dynamically. This is great for people that have history of groin injuries, or if you're just trying to get yourself to shift and internally rotate into a hip a little bit more. Common thing that people always say to train is going to be your posterior chain. And one of the things that makes up your posterior chain is going to be the glute max. And the way we train this is going to be a long lever bridge isometric. The goal is to get as much hip extension, endurance and strength as possible so that we can start to offload the back a little bit. People that typically have a lot of weak glutes or restricted glutes extend from the lower back opposed to extending from their hip. So this is one exercise that we'll start with. It's going to be a long lever bridge. You can shimmy your legs out a little bit more, keep the toes off the ground. And then you're just gonna come up into a bridge like so. And with double leg, obviously it's gonna be easier. If that feels okay, what Lucas can do is bring one knee to his chest. Perfect, now we got a single leg. If this is easy, what Lucas can do also to challenge his hips even more is if he's got his arms by his side, keep it completely crossed or even reaching towards the ceiling. And that forces that hip to stabilize even further. You got a lot more glutes and hamstrings there. But holding this for 35 to 45 seconds is a great way to start to train the hip, and you might even find some asymmetry side to side if you've had previous hip or back injuries in the past. So utilize the double leg initially, single leg, and start to take away your base of support here. One of the most undertrained muscle groups in the hip is the hip flexor itself. We always stretch it, but we never strengthen it. And if you do see a strengthening exercise, it looks like this, right? You have a yoga block and you're kind of moving it around and over the yoga block. But that's like training your bicep like this. You want to be able to lengthen the muscle as much as you can and then shorten it from that lengthened position because you're going to get way more load. And this is too much in a shortened position. We've got Lucas set up right now with a cable kind of pull through exercise with the hip flexor. And we're going to make sure that the hip is actually in extension and then he pulls it through all the way at the top. And this is way more efficient than doing the end range lift-offs because you're going to get a full length in a hip flexor. And we don't care too much about the single leg stability here because we're just trying to stress the hip. So feel free to use a dowel rod to keep your balance. A little bit of weight goes a long way here. And you just feel just hip flexor working, not a pinch in your hip or anywhere in the lower back or the QL. You just want to feel a nice deep hip flexor work here. And I typically go for higher repetitions because with lower reps, it's really going to be hard to set this up. Here's the problem with the industry, right? You have a bunch of prehab exercises that are way too easy and it doesn't actually prepare you for the demands that you're going to see in your goals or your sport. So hopefully today you got a couple of ideas and things that you can plug into your warm-up or your training routine to get your hips a little bit stronger and a little bit more mobile. Now, if you're someone that's been dealing with hip pain for a long period of time, you're not gonna need something like this. You're probably gonna need something that's a little bit more specific. So if you're looking for something that's more specific, that's not only gonna address your hip, but maybe the knee, the ankle, the back, the rib cage, and everything else that can potentially contribute to the pain that you're experiencing, you can book a free consultation below. You'll schedule a phone call on our website and you'll get to talk to one of our therapists to see if what you're experiencing is something that we can help you get long-term relief with.